Patronisters, with Wimbledon celebrating 100 years of centre court in 2022 this year, what were the players wearing in the early days of the tennis tournament, and what patterns can we use to knit those styles now? So, anyone for tennis? That is vintage knitting patterns, of course. It was a world before Lycra, when a wool cardigan or vest was a fashion statement, both on and off court. So will one of these patterns be your next cast on this summer? We'll see vintage knitting patterns for women and men in case Wimbledon inspires you to pick up your tennis racket in a vintage style. The big question is, will you be inspired to knit in Wimbledon's all-white tradition or go for a splash of summery intense colours to confuse your opponent? Let's have a quick look at Wimbledon's tennis fashions so our knitting can be inspired by the trends. Wimbledon's first tournament was in 1877 for men's singles only. It wasn't until 1884 when they introduced ladies' singles and men's doubles to the tournament. In those early days, the tennis outfits were based on the fashions of the time. This is an illustration from Ladies' Home Journal in 1881 of two girls in tennis outfits, and it certainly wouldn't be considered sportswear by today's standards. The Wimbledon whites, though, are demonstrated in the picture of William Renshaw, who won Wimbledon 7 times, holding the record with Pete Sampras until Roger Federer broke that record for the number of wins. He is pictured here with his twin brother, also a winner of Wimbledon in the 1880s. Although no knits are clearly shown in these tennis pictures, did you know there are knitted corsets for girls and women that could be worn under the outer clothing? This is an illustration from Ladies' Home Journal from May 23, 1891, showing the Sanitary Knitted Corset Company's product. The magazine reports, "From a hygienic point of view, the sanitary knitted corset is the best known, especially for growing girls and delicate ladies, and hundreds other who have tested the comfort and durability. It's not, as many might suppose from the fact of its being the knitted corset, merely a shapeless woolen bodice, but a really well-fashioned, properly boned and substantial wearing corset, possessing the greatest advantage over ordinary stiff stays, costing double the price." I don't think I'm up to patterning a knitted corset, but we'd love to know if any of you are up for that challenge. Originally, ladies' tennis fashions appeared to be very similar to the everyday Victorian and Edwardian dress for the Wimbledon winners from the very first Ladies' Championship in 1884 to the early 19-teens. Although lots of commentators, including those on British Pathy, talk about these dresses being restrictive, I don't think that is fair to these female athletes who seem to be moving very well in the corseted long dresses. And they aren't tripping over those long skirts, which would certainly have been my downfall. However, I suspect they would have been worn for match play and a lot heavier than modern sportswear, so I'm sure it had some impact on their performance. Suzanne Lenglen broke the convention of women playing tennis in long dresses, although her dresses in the 1920s were still below the knee. She was a big star both on and off tennis court, setting trends on the tennis court with her flapper-inspired fashions, with her dropped waist and long line cardigans. She was certainly a celebrity and demonstrated in the Glasgow Herald running a series with her on how to play lawn tennis, as seen in this advert from the Pershore Advertiser from the 24th of April 1926. Her sleeveless dresses were very controversial at the time due to a decency argument. She introduced her signature bandana to keep her hair out of her eyes, and dominated the Wimbledon tournament, winning 6 times from 1919 to 1923 and again in 1925. So she was the first woman to win in the current centre court 100 years ago. This picture from the Agence de Presse Mesure of her is with Queen Mary at the 1926 Wimbledon Championships. I wonder if any of her cardigans were hand knit. Weldon's Guide to Fancy work from 1922 has a pattern for a long housecoat that could be used to replicate the flapper style knits. If you have a better knitting pattern to suggest to other patternisters, why don't you leave a comment below? Ellen Wills Moody's record 8 wins from 1927 to 1938 was also done in style. She typically wore a sailor suit with a pleated knee-length skirt, which became popularised as the pleated tennis skirt. Silly Ossem, the German tennis player, is seen here, and she regularly sported a long V-neck cardigan in white. We'll talk about a Lycra pattern later that I think would be a good one to knit, especially if you extended the length a bit. The pleated skirt then evolved into the knee-length pleated short for ladies in the 1940s, when tennis returned to the centre court after the war, which was still showing signs of the direct hit it took in 1940. It became very common to see women coming onto court with cardigans or woolen jackets before their match, and some even played with them on, presumably when the day was cooler. It wasn't just women that were evolving tennis fashion. René Lacoste won Wimbledon in 1925 and 1928 and was nicknamed the Crocodile because of how he dealt with his opponents. Fred Perry won Wimbledon 3 times in a row from 1934 to 1936. Let's start with Lystra's hand knitwear in Lavender pattern number 636, priced at 2d, or 2 pence. It's called Centre Court and was knit in 3-ply wool. It has a cool lace pattern, which will make it more airy whilst you warm up on court. Would you be inspired to swap the alternate arc of yarn overs around so you have more of a tennis ball inspired pattern, rather than the repeated arc of the tennis ball? The advertising on the back of this pattern would suggest it's a 1930s pattern, from the styling of the models and the knits themselves, along with the 2D pricing. Do you like the gentle peplin styling with the rib at the waist? I wonder if this was modelled after a particular tennis player's style in the 1930s. The pattern was written to fit a 34 to 36 inch bust though, so not very inclusive. The next pattern, number 1510, is from William Briggs & Co. That is what the WB logo stood for in Penelope's WB Mardell DK wool or quick knit wool. It was designed to fit a 32 to 34 inch bust and was called just a tennis cardigan. This one has 9 buttons and a lace pattern to knit. The more fitted feel looks like it was slightly later, as the 3D pricing also suggests on the front. The third pattern, number 829, is from Weldon's and is styled 4 ways for this classic cardigan in 4 sizes from 34 to 40 inches. Although not what we call size inclusive by today's standards, this shows that not all vintage patterns were written for 34-inch busts. This is an interesting pattern from Weldon's, who were printers and not yarn manufacturers wanting to sell their yarn, as this pattern says the original garments were knitted in a number of different brands of wool, so no one brand had the exclusive design here. The wools used were Templeton's Air Beam Super Scotch Fingering 3-ply, Peyton's Beehive Fingering 3-ply, or Mountain Made Botany wool, also in 3-ply. The next pattern for a quick game of tennis is number 889 from Lycra again in Lavender wool, but this one is slightly later with the 3D price. The shoulder pad suggests more from 1940s, and the styling is more like the jackets that were worn by female tennis players coming on and off court for their matches at Wimbledon. And ladies, this has a pocket. Yay for a pocket to hold a hanky to pat the glistening beads of perspiration off your brow at the end of a match. It is knit in a 3x2 rib, which looks really flattering. The pattern is also written with a long sleeve version for those British summer days when it's not so hot. The next pattern has options for a lady's sleeveless pullover or a long or 3/4 length sleeve cardigan. It's Cecil's pattern number 401, and it costs 4 pence from the 4D on the front. The measurements are fit to a 34 to 36 inch bust. Now this is a brand of knitting patterns that's fairly rare in my collection. I don't know if this is because Eng Wools Limited in Bradford didn't produce many, or if they weren't widely circulated for people to have bought. The fourpence would generally suggest this is a 1940s pattern if we assume that they were competitive with other patterns at the time. But what do you think with that hairstyle on the front? Do you have many Cecil branded patterns in your collections? I know they obtained a registered trademark for Cecil wools in Nigeria in April 1961, so they were certainly around for a while. Not to forget your mixed doubles partner on court, Peyton's and Baldwin's pattern number 930 has a V-neck pullover in 3-stitch patterns, a simple rib, a Donegal rib, and a stocking stitch pattern. The pattern says the white ribbed pullover would be ideal for tennis. The omnibus pullover pattern could be knit in 3 sizes from 36, 38 and 40 inch chest. The 4D price would also suggest this is a 1940s pattern again, but it could also be knit to replicate the men's fashions from 1920s onwards, as they didn't change knitwear styles significantly over that period. And it's certainly such a classic style that Bjorn Borg could have also worn it in the 1970s too. Moving into the 1950s, these are some more tennis coats and cardigans you may want to add to your knitting queue. You'll find a tennis coat in Stitchcraft's pamphlet Sportswear in Knitting. The booklet was priced at £1 and has designs for golf, cricket, as seen here, fishing and even trunks or a knitted swimsuit. Not so sure about the swimwear, as we all know what our knits do when we wash them. The tennis coat looks really stylish with the texture and is designed for a 34 to 36 inch bust. It also came with pockets. This appears to be more of a structured jacket similar to the grey Althea Gibson was seen wearing. Althea was the pioneering black American woman who broke the colour divide in international tennis, winning Wimbledon's doubles in 1956 to 58 and the singles in 1957 and 58. And even starred opposite John Wayne in 1959's the film The Horse Soldiers. From the July 1953 My Home magazine comes a tennis jacket which looks like it was more for a fancy competition than your weekly club match. It's an Angora jacket designed in what the magazine called the Magyar style, that was highly fashionable at the time it seems. This was knit in 34 quarter-ounce balls of fur wool Supreme Angora, so it would have been an expensive knit, not just then but also now. Just as well, it also seems to be able to be worn for an enchanting evening too. The shaping of this jacket means that the bust sizing is actually taken under the batwing sleeve. I always like a pattern with a diagram if you ever want to resize it. Let me know in the comments if that's something you appreciate too in knitting patterns, and maybe some of the designers can add that to theirs. It does look very stylish indeed though, doesn't it? The next pattern is from Serdar, number 1290, and you can see it says super fast to knit on the front cover. But don't be confused, that's actually the name of the wool, and not a determination of how easy and therefore fast it was to make. It was designed for a 36-inch bust. If you want some more modern styling, then I have 3 vintage patterns to suggest you search out, from the 60s onwards for both men and women. They are Peyton's pattern number 9455 called Love All. I like the tennis pun there, Peyton's. It also has a wider size range from 34 to 40 inch bust, or chest, as the knits were for both men and women. And the 9D pricing on the front suggests it was from the late 1960s. The next 2 are from Serdar, pattern numbers 6097 and 6393. Probably from the 1970s, when the sizing on these are from 32 to 46 inches, or the men's slipover goes up to a 50-inch chest. The patterns, despite being about 50 years old, would certainly be good for anyone who plays cricket, tennis or badminton now, as they are classic knits, and would certainly look good for any Borg look-alike for a fancy dress party. If you like this look at vintage knitting patterns and the celebrities that inspired them, and the Wimbledon styles over the years, then you'll love to watch this video next on celebrity knitting. Thanks for watching, and if you want to tune in for more, remember to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy knitting!